Namaskar, hello and welcome to CIET NCERT's live phone-in special program of NCSL, that is National Center for School Leadership. And NCSL brings to you this series on school leadership development, and every Friday we discuss a different topic under this series. So our today's topic is designing a framework for learning based on pedagogical leadership. So if you have any questions, any queries, feel free to reach out to us. You can call us on our number, which is 8800440559, and ask your questions. And you're also watching us on PMeVIDYA channel number 6, channel number 9 and channel number 12. You're also watching us on our YouTube channel, which is NCERT Official, and also the YouTube channel of NCSL, that is National Center for School Leadership. So there are multiple ways through which you can connect with us and raise your questions. This whole series, it's not just for students, but it's for principals, for school heads, for teachers, for everybody. So let me introduce you to our today's guest, and we have with us Dr. Charu Malik. Welcome, ma'am. Ma'am is from NCSL NEPA, and along with her we have Dr. Shadma Absar. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Tanvi.
So she is also from NCSL NEPA, and let me tell you what NEPA is. NEPA is the National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration. So I welcome both our guests once again in our studio, and let's begin this discussion. My first question would be, ma'am, how do you, both of you, see the school leadership in the framework of quality education?
Right. So we all know that the education systems across the world have expanded phenomenally. Yeah. And in the beginning decades of expansion, there was a drive on democratization of education. There was a drive on massification of education, where the focus was more on improving access to school education and improving the enrollment ratios. But of late, in the past 2 decades, the notion of quality education has become very, very important, and quality that is hinging on learning, the concept of learning, how important it is for every child to learn. That defines the quality of an education system. But it is not just important to learn, it is also important to design an education system that is inclusive as well as equitable, so that even the most disadvantaged sections of student population have access to education, and not just access to education or schools, but also access to quality educational opportunities. So this has been the current paradigm of education, school education globally. If you look at the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, it talks about ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning for all, lifelong opportunities for all. And if you also look at the latest report by UNESCO, The Futures of Education, it's a very interesting read for our school leaders. It talks about strengthening education as a public endeavor and common good. And there also there has been a great focus on equity, inclusion, and democratic participation of all students. Now, when we look at the Indian context, the recent policy document, the National Education Policy 2020, has talked about quality education in detail and discussed various frameworks that can be operationalized to make quality a reality in Indian schools. In the context of quality school education, the idea of school leadership has become very important. And if we look at the earlier documents, the 12th five-year plan was instrumental in establishing school leadership as an important mediator for improving quality education. Okay. So since 2000, since the 12th five-year plan, the focus has been on improving leadership capabilities of school leaders and teacher leaders, so that the learning can be improved, learning that is equitable and inclusive, and we can have all children who are progressing at their own learning pace and improving with their learning outcomes. So in NEP 2020, there is also a focus on professional development of school leaders as leaders of the 21st century who are able to lead the school towards transformation and towards improving student learning. right? So if you look at the 5.16 para number, it says that the focus of NEP 2020 is on preparing and implementing pedagogical plans based on competency-based education. And this is one of the most important functions of a school leader. Okay. So if this is the most important function of a school leader, of becoming a pedagogical leader, of developing a pedagogical plan, then what it is, and how pedagogical leadership has panned over the last few decades of research in school leadership. We're going to talk about that today.
Okay, all right. So before going any further, let's just understand what school leadership is all about. So, ma'am.
Then school leadership is the core of quality education, I would say. Okay. Where we aim at achieving learning, student learning. So various definitions are there, but today we are going to discuss two very important definitions, which are given by Leithwood. And the first definition is that the leadership functions, there are two important leadership functions. One is providing directions and exercising influence, which includes setting direction, developing people, developing organization, and developing instructional program. And school leadership is a very important component, and it is considered as the second most important component after classroom teaching, which influences student learning. Okay. So leadership plays a very important role in improving student learning, I would say.
Okay. And this, I think, Dr. Shadna, if you would agree, Leithwood et al. Have done this research in 2004 and then in the subsequent years. And now in 2020, Leithwood et al. Have revisited the claims on school leadership, and they have found that
7 strong claims about leadership they have presented. And one of the most important claim is that classroom teaching, after classroom teaching, student leadership, school leadership is the most important factor, second most important factor rather.
Right. Okay. So I think this really positions school leadership as a very critical variable for quality education and for student learning.
Absolutely. Okay. So we would like to understand more about learning from both of you. So how would you define learning in school leadership? And if there are any different models related to it, would you like to explain them?
Right. So if you look at the presentation also, there are many models, as Dr. Shadna was discussing, there are many models that are existing on school leadership. But I think what we did as a center, we tried to identify what are the 3 most critical models which are focusing on learning of children, of students. And we came out with 3 most important. The first is the leadership for learning. And this is a very broad, comprehensive framework that has been conceptualized around 4 different components. So it talks about what are the personal values and beliefs of school leaders, how does that play out in the school organization, what are the focus areas for leadership practices, what are the contexts for leadership, the context of the school, the context of the organization, the context of the student, the context of the teacher, and sharing leadership, which again is existing in multiple forms such as distributed or shared or collaborative leadership. So leadership for learning really talks about all the possible parameters in a school organization which need to be worked upon to arrive at student learning.
It's very holistic.
Yes.
Very broadest concept.
It absolutely. It is the broadest concept of leadership in operation for improving the student learning.
Okay.
Right? Then we also talk about instructional leadership. That was one of the initial models on school leadership research. And that can be explained as the direct or indirect behaviors that significantly affect teacher interaction and teacher instruction. And as a result, that improves student learning. So instructional leadership would be a very narrow conception of leadership practice in operation that influences student learning. So instructional leadership has been a model that was very well accepted for many decades. Then we come with pedagogical leadership that we are going to talk about in detail today. Now, pedagogical leadership has a different framework it is also focusing on learning, but it has a different framework. It is predicated on informed teacher practice and reflection. And it demonstrates credible knowledge of learning and teaching in conjunction with knowledge of processes of improving school-wide learning. So here the focus is more on learning of the student. And also the focus is more on whole school improvement, which is centering around the idea of learning.
Okay.
So pedagogical leadership, we would say, is a much more contemporary and advanced form of instructional leadership,
Yes.
with a different perspective that we're going to talk in detail.
Yes.
And leadership for learning is the broadest sense.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
So like you said, it is the broadest sense, it is the broadest one. And if we compare these three models, are there any differences, are there any similarities in between these three models which you would like to highlight here?
Yes, if we, Tanvi, if we compare these three models, so they exist in a continuum actually, and they start, like Dr. Charu has already said that instructional leadership being the most narrow one, then we move to pedagogical leadership and leadership for learning, which is the broadest framework. So when we come to instructional leadership, we see that teacher is at the center stage. Only classroom practices are important. You know, the focus of this leadership framework was improving classroom teaching.
Okay.
Only classroom teaching practices were improved. Teaching was considered as an art or a craft, and principal was considered as an instructor of teachers. You know, to tell them that how do they teach, and it was very teacher centric. And whereas in the pedagogical leadership, you see that the focus is on the learner, needs and interest and aspirations of the learner.
Okay.
Child is at the center stage, the learner is at the center stage. Focus is more on student learning. It's not only on classroom transaction only. It is not teaching learning, it is learning teaching. So the learner comes first. And leadership for learning is the broadest, wherein the school leader is considered to define vision and lead teaching learning processes, academic supervision and collaboration with the stakeholders as well. You know, all the stakeholders are involved, and it is for the lifelong learning actually for all the members of the group, you know, whatever the group is involved, all the stakeholders, lifelong learning is there.
Right. So I think we can delve a little deeper into these three models and try to understand, because school leaders would find this very, very useful in also seeing these three frameworks as the anchors through which they can look at their own classroom processes, look at their own schooling processes that they are currently leading in the school. So as rightly said by Dr. Shadma, instructional leadership was really focused more on the teacher, and teacher being at the center stage. Okay. So in fact, there was a lot of focus and a lot of pressure on the teacher
Yes.
to perform and to come up with student learning outcomes.
The outcomes were considered to be only coming from the teacher side actually. The teacher
Right.
was responsible for their outcomes.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the principal was the instructor.
Yes.
Instructor of the teacher, so that the teacher's professional practices improves and teacher's knowledge improves. So there was some focus on teacher professional development, but with the angle of improving the student learning outcomes.
From the perspective of school leader only. The school leader
Yes.
was considered as an instructional leader, and only he used to
Yes.
tell them how to teach.
Yes. So basically what happened in instructional leadership, the autonomy of the teacher and the child was somewhere missing.
Okay.
Right? And it had a very narrow ideology in terms of how to transact the mandated curriculum of the school and not really go beyond that. So as Dr. Shadma said, you know, classroom transactions are the most important, and they influence student learning outcomes.
Yeah.
So whatever learning happens outside the classroom is probably not that
Wasn't considered in this framework rather, I would say.
right. So that was instructional. And then when we come to pedagogical leadership, the learning needs and aspirations and the interests of the children are at the center stage. And what are the learning requirements of the students that become the central pivot on which the school leadership practices are designed. So that is the real shift in pedagogical leadership. And assessment is learning. in pedagogical leadership.
Yes.
So when you're learning, the learning outcomes are assessed.
Holistic way of assessing, not only through tests and some writing,
and standardized tests or external evaluation. It has to be. It is an organic process of qualitative observation as well as some sort of quantitative assessments.
Even outside the classroom as well.
And they also say that in pedagogical leadership there was a introduction of formative and summative assessment, which was not there in instructional leadership. So in pedagogical leadership there is again a focus on teacher autonomy, on the autonomy of the student as a learner. Which is why the idea of professional learning communities was introduced in pedagogical leadership. So where the teachers come together and share their practices, share their knowledge, enhance their repertoire of skills. And of course, I think the whole idea of craft or art that we were talking in instructional leadership was singularly driven, but here it was a collaborative process.
It got dissolved into, various channels.
Yes.
Distributed leadership actually.
Right. So this is a more contemporary framework for understanding how a leader can lead schooling and classroom processes where really child is at the center and the child's learning is most important. And then we come to leadership for learning, which is a much broader framework like we had initially discussed. And here every stakeholder is a lifelong learner. So whereas in instructional there is focus on teacher, in pedagogical there is focus more on the learning of the child, and here in leadership for learning we have a lot of focus on all the stakeholders being lifelong learners.
Yes.
So here it's again in a very broad sense we are talking about learning.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So now that we have discussed 3 different models, and here we go further in this discussion, and I would like to ask our experts, ma'am, how can a school leader operationalize pedagogical leadership?
See, Tanvi, NCSL has come out with the handbook, which is Pedagogical Leadership, a handbook for leading learning in schools, in collaboration with Central Board of Secondary Education in March 2021. So it gives us an idea of model of pedagogical leadership, wherein we can say that what of pedagogical leadership. It consists of 3 layers actually. Layer 1 is about what is pedagogical leadership. Layer 2 is how to practice pedagogical leadership. And layer 3, that why are we doing it? And we are doing it for improving student learning basically.
Right.
So in layer 1 of this framework, layer 1 talks about creating a vision, building a shared vision, developing SMART goals, developing a personal vision as a school leader, and aligning personal values to the education system's values.
Yes, so I think this, like we had discussed in the initial stage, that a definition of school leadership is about a leader being a visionary, setting the direction of the school, setting the direction of the organization. So here the layer 1 is really talking about developing a collaborative and shared vision for the school with the idea of learning at the center. Yes. So when we have been, in fact, when NCSL had been conducting workshops across many government schools, so we had come up with this whole idea of how to create a shared vision, how to create a collaborative vision. But that collaborative vision was for school improvement. It had a broader purpose, it had a broader aim that was in terms of how to improve schooling processes, any possible processes that comes under schooling. But here the purpose is learning, specifically learning. So here when we are creating a shared vision or a collaborative vision, it is for improving learning of each student, and in fact improving learning of all the teachers as well. And the school leader herself. So that becomes very critical here. The layer 1 is really setting the direction for learning for your school, right? And another important aspect is sometimes we also see that school leaders get very alienated and get demotivated. So we have introduced here a concept of how to align the personal vision with the organizational vision or with the school vision. That is very, very critical, you know, so that the school leader can be a competent leader to give the best that she is possible to do. That becomes very critical here. So how does that happen when you're able to align the personal vision which is not really related to your personal life, but a vision that is your personal goal for your life, for the way you want to improve in future, your professional goals, and they must align with the school vision. So then only the vision can get aligned and a vision can be implemented in its truest sense. Okay. So layer 1 essentially is, if I were to say, how do I become a pedagogical leader? Yes, the first set of actions would be to develop a shared collaborative vision with learning in the center. Then layer 2.
Layer 2 is about practicing pedagogical leadership. There are various pointers which are given in this layer, which are engaging in teachers' professional development, initiating innovation, leading teaching learning processes, developing a learning culture in the school, building an inclusive culture, becoming and being a self-aware leader, where self is also very important, and in providing teacher professional development opportunities for improving student learning. Learning here is again very important. All these innovations and teaching learning processes should be directed towards improving teaching learning in the school actually.
Right, right. So here I think another important aspect that you have highlighted is that self is a very important factor in leadership, and how does one become aware of oneself as a leader, as someone who is a leader by action and not just by position, is able to bring everyone together towards a common purpose, a common vision for the school, and has the requisite knowledge, skills and attitudes to develop a foresight where I want to take my school and where do I want to take the learning levels of my students in the next 1 year, let us say, or in the next 2 years or 3 years, because vision is always created for a period of at least 1 to 3 years. So how do you bring everyone together, and how do you enhance your self-awareness? How do you build on your own competencies, and how do you build on the competencies of the teachers? Both their personal characteristics, the value system, the belief system, and their professional practice. How do they improve their subject expertise, for example, or how do they improve their transactional methodologies in classroom processes, or how do they bring the outside world into the classroom? How can they take their students outside of their school?
How do they connect the two, you know?
How do they connect the environment with the school? Then how does the community become an integral part of the learning teaching process in the school? So these are some of the questions that a school leader can grapple with, can find answers and design strategies for actions when we are talking about layer 2. So that is possible only when a school leader is fully developed self. Because once you have those competencies developed in you, then you can transact those competencies in your teachers.
Yes, of
course. And encourage them to also become self-aware.
And teacher leaders actually.
And teacher leaders. And now we're talking about student leadership as well.
Yes, yes.
So this is like, you know, building leadership capacities amongst all the stakeholders of the school, but with a single-minded focus on improving the learning of each and every stakeholder, not just the student, but each and every stakeholder. So this is the layer 2. Then comes the layer 3.
Layer 3 is about assuring student outcomes, which is the main purpose of the why part of this this framework actually. Attaining and progress across all school subjects, acquiring competencies in the 21st century skills, personal, social and emotional development, strengthening of moral and ethical sensitivity. So both soft skills and hard skills along with the subject knowledge is important for the holistic development, which NEP also talks about for the holistic development of the child. All these student outcomes are visualized in the context of student learning. This is layer 3 of pedagogical leadership.
Right. So here I think this whole idea of competency-based education that has become central to the reforms that are taking place in the Indian education system is something that our school leaders need to know of and find more about. I think that would be an interesting exercise for our school leaders, you know, to explore what are these 21st century skills that we're talking about in the students. Is it problem solving? Is it collaboration? Is it a spirit of democratic practice? Is it the spirit of equity and fairness? Is it collaboration? We have this
delegation, communication,
right? Communication, role modeling. And in fact, the idea of organizational citizenship behavior that we're talking about in the teachers. So if you could kind of explain a little bit about that.
Yeah. Citizenship behavior, teachers' organizational citizenship behaviors actually refers to those kind of behaviors which are not actually defined in their job profiles or their roles, but they deliberately do them to improve student learning or to achieve organizational goals. Some of the organizational citizenship behaviors are sportsmanship, like avoiding conflicts, consciousness, like mitigating the conflicts and avoiding creating unnecessary problems, following the rules and regulations, altruism, helping others, helping new colleagues actually. So all these kind of behaviors would help in achieving organizational citizenship, the organizational goals, and improve student learning as well.
True. So I think these are what you're talking about, and they're not written somewhere. But these are certain behaviors that improve the interpersonal relations
and personal value based. Actually, they are more value based.
Yes.
So they avoiding conflicts, helping others, going out of the way to help others, within the rules and regulations, not going beyond them. But they're not defined as such, and these behaviors are never rewarded. And but that can be appreciated. They can always be appreciated by the school heads, and the other teachers can also learn through them, and they always help them in becoming teacher leaders and improving the school goals and learning outcomes of the students.
Right. So I think if leaders can also explore what are these behaviors that we're talking about in this variable, that is the organizational citizenship behavior. If you could search and explore what are those behaviors and create a list of these behaviors and encourage teachers to exhibit such behaviors, it will really strengthen the school culture.
Yes.
And it will really strengthen the learning
motivation and other aspects.
Right.
And they would be more satisfied towards their profession and they would be more committed towards teaching and learning and teaching, I would say, and that would really improve student learning.
Right, because we all know that, in classrooms and in schools, the way the behaviors of school leaders and teachers are many times emulated by the students. So if a teacher is exhibiting a sportsmanship, or if the teacher is going out and of her way and helping someone or a new colleague, or mentoring a new colleague, or creating spaces where there is open discussion and a democratic debate, let us say, and of course avoids creating unnecessary conflicts. So there's so many behaviors. It's a plethora of behaviors which also come under teacher professional development. So it is not a very narrow understanding of teacher professional development that I would undergo TPD for just subject expertise.
Some training or acquiring some pedagogical skills only.
Right.
These soft skills are also very important.
Absolutely.
And if one or two teacher practices them, I think the others will definitely emulate them.
Yes.
And that will really help in improving the school culture.
Right.
And the school culture becomes more and more student learning, oriented towards student learning actually.
Right.
When they would see there are lesser conflicts, there are more teachers are more collaborative.
Absolutely.
And they would also love to collaborate and do things together, I would say.
Right. And of course, the most important leadership attribute we must say is providing support and doing things together, being patient, and really supporting in each other's growth. That is very, very critical, especially in today's times. Supporting each other in their development as professionals, in their development as students. So these behaviors are much more important somewhere, more than just a textual understanding or textual knowledge. So learning competencies, when you are talking about, be it for students or for teachers or for the school leader, the competencies do not include just subject specialization. They include a host of other behaviors that are probably written or unwritten, said or unsaid. So these three layers actually create the model for pedagogical leadership in operation in the school. So this is a framework that we would want school leaders to explore and
Yes.
implement.
Okay. So I'm sure all the school leaders who are watching this program, they are going to definitely implement these points, these frameworks you have just mentioned. And like you said, that leadership is one important aspect, and a leadership has a lot of responsibilities. So let's go further, and I would like to ask you that is there any annual pedagogical plan that you would like to mention and give us all the details about?
Yes, like Dr. Charu referred in her initial comments that NEP 2020 also talks about that for the continuous professional development of school leaders, they need to know how to prepare annual pedagogical plans and implement them actually in their schools. So this framework actually gives us an idea that how to develop annual pedagogic plans to improve student learning. So annual pedagogic plan is basically a forward-looking strategic plan that is built on the identified needs and gaps of students for improving their learning in their classrooms and outside the classrooms, in the school basically. It's a very broad framework which provides a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of flexibility in terms of catering it to the various cultures and socio-economic dimensions that I would say.
Right.
And it is a process-based planning exercise which aims at improving the schooling processes to ensure that all students learn, and learning is at the core basically. All these practices, plans is to improve student learning and develop on a continuum of school improvement with a focus on learning.
Right. So here I think most of the school leaders who are working across the country, they also prepare school development plan,
Yes.
Which is a very broad, comprehensive planning exercise for the improvement, for the school improvement. So you must be aware of the steps that are involved
Yes.
in planning exercises. So this could be said to be one of those planning exercises, but here of course the focus is on improving the learning and thereby improving the quality education that we need to provide to each student. So we would go according to the steps that we normally use for SDPs. But here the annual pedagogical plan is prepared for a singular year. It's an annual plan. And here I would like to highlight one thing. Normally in planning exercises, I think one of the mishaps that happen is the fact that planning becomes a little rigid sort of a process where goals are defined and strategies are rigid, strategies are strict. Here the idea is to customize the planning exercise in the context of the learning needs of students. So if some strategy works, it does not work, can we change it? Can we modify it? What other resources can we use to better transact this concept? How else can we collaborate and negotiate with stakeholders so that the learning process of the children becomes better? How can we bring in the outside world into the school? And if you look at the secondary schooling process, for instance, and find the fact that vocational education has become so important now. So as a pedagogical leader who is operating at the secondary level, the secondary education level, how can you bring in the industry interface with the school so that the competencies of students are enhanced? which is not just learning based on the text, but of course, that leads to their self-reliance and maybe entrepreneurship opportunities for students. So this is something which we have to keep in mind while we are designing the annual pedagogical plan. It has to be customized, it has to be contextualized, and it has to be flexible. Flexible according to the students and what they want and what areas would they want to improve. Keeping that at the mind.
Levels as well, at the very foundation level and at the middle level and secondary level. At all levels they can be, and they can be monitored very closely. I mean,
yes.
over a period of time, you can do them at quarterly basis or annual reviews, so as to improve the practices.
Right. So this is something that we need to keep in mind while we are designing this annual pedagogical plan. And again, this has to be a collaborative exercise. So we have this concept of professional learning community. Can we create a PLC, a professional learning community within the school of all the teachers together and discussing what are the issues that students are facing at different levels or in different subjects or across different skills. And then design strategies according to that in the annual pedagogical plan. So we have the handbook which details out step by step this preparation of the annual pedagogical plan. However, the most important thing a school leader needs to remember, and all the teacher leaders that they need to remember, is that they must be flexible, because the learning graph of children and students is not linear. It is a very iterative process. A lot of back and forth happens, and this is a set of skills and knowledge and attitudes that students need to imbibe to become better at their own performance, at their own competency level.
Okay, Shadma ma'am, would you like to add something to it?
Just wanted to add to this that annual pedagogic plan does not focus on one aspect only. It focuses on many aspects, not only what happens in the classroom and how do we assess that learning. Whatever happens outside the classroom, whatever learning is happening around them, that is also included in this.
Right.
Not only whatever is happening in the classroom.
Right. And of course, teacher professional development and professional development of the school leader.
Yes,
is very important. So
self is most important.
Self is most important, definitely. A professional development of oneself, and of course encouraging the professional development of others is very critical. Because every student would like to be taught or interact with teachers and leaders who are competent,
yes,
and who have all the skills, right? So that is the expectation from the perspective of a child, from the perspective of a student. So it's not that we need the students to be performing at their best, but we also want the school leaders and teachers to be a role model.
Absolutely.
yes.
So thank you so much to both our experts for giving us your time, and this was highly informative program, and we learned a lot about these frameworks which are meant for learning, and even the annual pedagogical plan which school leaders can learn how to develop one. So thank you so much both of you for being here, for joining us in this program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the viewers for watching this program. If you have missed it for any reason, please watch it again on NCRT Official, that is our YouTube channel. Take great care of yourself. We are wrapping up our today's sessions here, but we'll again come back tomorrow for more sessions. If you want to know the details, you can always visit the website CIET or Swayam Prabha. Thank you once again. Take care. Namaskar.